By this point, if you're watching this video, you probably already know about the Silly Butts Breacher and how everyone is talking about this, and it is truly an amazing blaster. So in today's video, I'm not really going to be pushing how amazing this blaster is, but I'm going to try to answer some questions for people that are on the fence as to whether or not they should pick up a breacher today from Added Darts. Now, I did receive a hardware kit for free from Added Darts, and I was able to print and build this breacher myself, and I have a lot of stuff to talk about. So this video will be two parts. It will be the build and the how do you get a breacher part, and then it will be the actual functionality of it and how it performs and how it stacks up against other shotgun blasters. So with all that said, let's jump into today's video. As of the time of filming this video, you can pick up a breacher hardware kit from Added Darts for $72. Now, if you would like Added Darts to print your breacher, they do offer a hardware kit plus 3D printed parts for $310. And if you want a fully assembled, you don't want to have any hassle, that is an additional $100, which, as you can see, it's a pretty expensive blaster. So the real question is it worth it? And we'll get to that in a little bit. But first, let's talk about the build. Now, the breacher is a huge build. If you have one 3D printer, count on this occupying that printer for quite a bit of time. Even with the bamboos that we run, which are very fast printers, these are still a very extensive build. Now, this blaster has been printed in 5 to 6 walls, depending on the different parts, and a pretty substantial infill, and it's got a lot of weight to it. If you purchase your 3D printed parts from Added Darts, they will come all prepped and cleaned and ready for assembly. But keep in mind, if printing your own parts, it's quite a bit of work as far as how much you have to print, clean up. The orientations of everything is pretty much laid out for you. Silly does a good job at laying out parts in the correct orientation for easy printing. And so any suggestions within the build guide, make sure to follow those. Now here's where things get interesting. Now the build, I'm gonna be honest, this is not your entry-level 3D printed Nerf blaster build. If you're new to the hobby and just starting out, or maybe you have a couple blasters under your belt, I don't know if I really recommend a breacher build. And the reason why I'm hesitant is mainly because of 3 things. Number 1, threaded rod. Now, threaded rod is a build technique that we are very familiar with in the hobby. It's been used for many years, and some of us looked at threaded rod as an old way of doing things, and we've moved on to what we call flat bar or U-channel, or just basically rigid bars and whatnot that run through the blaster that pull it all together. This blaster, because of its size, Silly opted to use threaded rod. Now, the main issue with threaded rod is when you put that first nut on it, or when you're sticking it into a brass insert. Now, brass inserts are a problem because brass is softer than what threaded rods are made out of, which is a metal threaded rod, which is harder than brass, essentially making cross-threading into a brass insert highly likely. So you have to be very careful that your threading on the rods are just right. Now, at Added Darts, they do cut the rod and trim the edges. They basically deburr it, try to get it to a cone shape. But I did find on a couple of my pieces of threaded rod, you still have to go back with maybe a file. I just used a standard file like this and knocked down some of those edges because it's critical when it first goes into the threading. If it's wrong, it will strip the stuff out. It will damage the nut or the brass insert. So all I have to say is for this build, save yourself a lot of hassle and test fit everything once you get your hardware kit. And don't be scared to take a file and knock off some of those sharp edges. The second problem with this build was the brass inserts. I know we kind of talked about them before, mainly up here. So whenever dealing with brass inserts, it's nice to have a flat surface to mount to. However, as you can see with this angle here, the brass inserts are supposed to go straight down. However, you have a flat angle. So setting them can be kind of weird because if you set them at this angle, see how this is an angle here? Basically what happens is it's now off, so when the threaded rod tries to connect to it, you're cross-threading. What I found was actually feeding the threaded rod through as you're working with the brass insert. So first, make sure the threads go in. Second, make sure your alignment's right as the plastic's cooling, and then push it in and make sure everything's right, and then push it down. Sounds a little bit tedious, and it's actually pretty frustrating. I had to do a lot of fiddling and whatnot up here to try to get those inserts just right. And that's one of the other issues with threaded rod. As opposed to flat bar, which is you put it in, you stick a pin through it, and you're good. Flat bar is extremely easy to work with. Now my last gripe, which isn't a huge gripe, but it is something that I always get frustrated when I see it. 9 times out of 10, when a designer decides to put their own support material into a design, it never ends well. And I say that because the tolerances of printers are so different. And not only that, but the tolerances within filament is different. So when someone puts in a pre-designed support material or support design, it just never works well. I happen to have an absolute nightmare of a time with this rail because I printed the files with Silly Butt's own support design that he put in there, and it was completely fused after I printed it. And I had to sit there with a flathead and painstakingly clear out the entire channels all the way down. And I'm not exaggerating, it took about 45 minutes to clean 3 parts. Full disclosure, I didn't check. Usually people have their own support file, and then they'll have files with basically you generate your own. And that could be the case with the breacher. I possibly just printed the wrong file set. So I just wanted to say, keep in mind, if you're printing on a printer other than what the designer designed the blaster around, tolerances can be different. I can tell you at Out of Darts, I know they use the Bamboo A1 printer, so these are all fitted to those tolerances. But I know when Silly Butts designs things, they like to send it out to various people with other printers and get feedback and tweak tolerances and whatnot. So other than that, I don't really have any other gripes about this. I just want to make a statement that this is not an easy build. I'm not saying it's a bad build. I'm just saying if you have no experience with 3D printed blasters and you jump into a breacher from Silly Butts, you're probably gonna have some level of frustration. Now, fortunately, if you have problems, I know Out of Darts has great customer service and you can always send them an email to orders@outofdarts.com if you have purchased a breacher from them and are experiencing issues with building it. So moving on to this blaster's performance. Now, if you're familiar with the Silly Butts Battle Axe, this has a very similar performance because of the size of the plunger tube, and basically this whole assembly is pretty much the same as what's in the Battle Axe. Now what I found is when you're firing 8 shots of short darts, you probably won't have too much power, pretty much not enough power to clear a faraway target. We're talking up to about 20 feet or so. Now that is quite the spread, and you're most definitely gonna tag whatever is in front of you up to probably about 30 feet. It's just worth noting that the blaster doesn't have a tremendous amount of power, and that's mainly due to all the whole mechanism. You got the barrel, you have a big faux barrel here, you have the tube, which as you can see, silly shells are very large, so obviously you're gonna have a very long tube. And so that leaves the blaster's power system basically here, because you have to have the catch assembly, the catch mechanism and all that. So really you just have this section here. I wouldn't say it's underpowered. I just wish it was a little bit more powerful. And I say that because when I hold the breacher, I feel like it could have received at least 1 inch of plunger tube. I feel like it could have just received a little bit more, just to give it that extra oomph. Now, I know that is a complete and total design change because now up here, this mechanism's having to be a little bit longer to accommodate for a longer draw when you prime it, but that's just my own personal gripe. I have to say, I've been waiting for a blaster like this for years. This blaster is very much comparable to the Spring Thunder, which I do have a Spring Thunder, and I'm gonna be honest, I had quite a bit of issues with my Spring Thunder as far as reliability. I kept having the shell ejector break, and I wasn't too fond of the Spring Thunder shells. And here's a quick comparison of the Spring Thunder shells versus the Silly shells. As you can see, you just have a lot more room in here. You definitely can't fire stuff like Mega XL. However, Mega XL didn't exist when this came out. And now for probably the biggest question all of you are having. If you're gonna pay that much for a Nerf shell ejecting shotgun, number one, is it worth it in its performance? And I will say yes. For all the different types of ammo it can fire and how hard it shoots, I will say yes, it is worth it. And secondly, the biggest concern a lot of people are gonna have is reliability. I've passed a few hundred shells through these various blasters, and from what I've seen, I haven't had any reliability issues. It is worth noting this blaster is technically still in beta, but I did notice on the older variants there were a couple issues with the lifter here, whereas this version of the breacher actually has 2 screws in the bottom where you can adjust them for the height to basically change the position of this lifter here. As you can see, this is pretty much where you want it. Sometimes it will lag too far down and then you have feeding issues. So in summary, what do I think about the breacher? I've been trying to hold it back, but I actually really love this thing. I am extremely happy to finally get my hands on a breacher. I just want people to know that it's not a blaster for everyone, and there's a lot of stuff you gotta know to run it, to maintain it. I actually would recommend that if you want a breacher, to have a 3D printer. That's my best advice. If you have a 3D printer and you know what you're doing and you're comfortable with cutting threaded rod or maybe sanding down some parts or reprinting some stuff, checking and tinkering with your printer's tolerances, that kind of stuff, the breacher's fine. And to be honest, that's actually building a lot of 3D printed stuff. There's a certain level of competence that you need to build these types of blasters. And if you have that, I think the breacher's great. Me personally, I'm very excited to have this. And every game I've run a breacher at, I've just had a smile on my face. It's a ton of fun. And obviously the breacher does really well in CQB type of game styles. So if you get a chance to run one, check it out. Highly encourage you to do so. Once again, I want to thank Out of Darts for sending in a hardware kit. If you'd like to pick one of these up, head on over to Out of Darts. I will leave a link in the description. As always, I want to thank you for watching today's video. Be safe and happy foam flinging.